There is a moment in adulthood when the noise fades. Not suddenly, not dramatically. It doesn't collapse. It thins out. The messages slow down. The invitations become occasional. The world keeps moving at the same speed, but it no longer reaches for you the way it used to. At first, you don't question it. You assume it's temporary, just a phase. Until one day, the silence lingers long enough to be noticed. And that's when you realize something unsettling. You are alone. Not abandoned. Not rejected. Not excluded. Just alone. This is not the loneliness of youth. Not heartbreak. Not the longing to be chosen. That loneliness is loud. It begs. It aches. This one doesn't. This is the loneliness that arrives after you've lived. After you've built things. After you've lost things. After you've outgrown people, places, and versions of yourself. It arrives quietly. Not as pain, but as space. And space is harder to explain than pain. Midlife loneliness feels different because it doesn't scream. It echoes. An empty room doesn't shout. It reflects. And reflection makes people uncomfortable. Because reflection doesn't distract you, doesn't entertain you, it doesn't let you escape. Most of us were taught something very simple. If you are alone, something went wrong. That connection means success. That solitude means failure. But that story doesn't explain this kind of silence, because nothing collapsed. Nothing exploded. You didn't lose people suddenly. You didn't push the world away. You simply stopped fitting. You stopped fitting into conversations that no longer made sense. Stopped laughing at jokes that felt hollow. Stopped pretending curiosity where none existed. Not because you became arrogant. Not because you became cold. But because you changed. And when you change deeply, not everything can follow. The space that remains feels vast, unfurnished, unfamiliar. And most people interpret that space as loss. But loss is not always what's happening. Here's what no one tells you. Midlife loneliness is rarely caused by absence. It's caused by alignment. You didn't become empty. You became precise. And precision removes noise. When you are younger, life is crowded. With urgency. With identity building. With proving yourself. You tolerate what doesn't fit because you're still becoming. Midlife is different. By now, you know what drains you. You know which versions of yourself were survival strategies. You know which relationships were built on momentum, not meaning. And when those fall away, silence moves in. That silence is unsettling because it asks a question you've avoided for years. Who are you when nothing is demanding your performance? No expectations, no roles, no applause, just you. Most people don't want to answer that, so they try to erase the silence. They fill their schedules, scroll endlessly, revive old connections that no longer fit. Not because they miss them, but because silence feels like standing still. But the echo remains. Because the void is not asking to be filled. It's asking to be faced. Midlife loneliness is often the first time you encounter yourself without distraction. No identity to maintain. No urgency to respond to. Just presence. And presence can feel unbearable at first. Because in the quiet, unresolved grief surfaces, grief for time, for choices, for roads not taken. Not regret exactly. Something subtler. Acceptance trying to arrive. And being resisted. This is where many people panic. Because acceptance feels like surrender. This is the real crisis of midlife. Not that life is ending, but that it's asking to be lived honestly. The heaviness you feel, the fatigue, the lack of enthusiasm, is not a lack of energy. It's energy being spent resisting truth. You are no longer who you were, and you cannot become who you are meant to be without letting something go. That is why the silence feels loud. The echo you hear is not emptiness, it's transition. Think of a room after the furniture has been removed. It feels hollow, cold, unfamiliar. But the room wasn't destroyed, it was cleared. Midlife loneliness clears space for depth, for discernment, for meaning that doesn't depend on stimulation. Stillness becomes necessary, not as a technique, but as a threshold. Slowly, something changes. You notice you no longer crave constant validation. Superficial connections drain you. Noise feels heavy. You value fewer things, but more deeply. This is not loss. This is refinement. The world becomes quieter because your inner compass becomes stronger. And not everyone can walk beside you there. That realization hurts. But it is honest. Midlife loneliness is the price of depth in a culture addicted to noise. It does not mean you are broken. It means you crossed a threshold. The hero's journey doesn't always end with celebration. Sometimes it ends with solitude. Because solitude is where integration happens, where the fragmented self becomes whole. The echo you hear is not calling you backward. It's inviting you inward. If you allow it, if you stop trying to silence it, you may discover that what you thought was emptiness was space. Space for a life that no longer needs to prove itself. Space for meaning that doesn't shout. Space